Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. A good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. A hired man who is not a shepherd and whose sheep are not his own sees a wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf catches and scatters them. This is because he works for pay and has no concern for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know mine and mine know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I will lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. These also I must lead, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have power to lay it down and power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
On this Sunday, the fourth Sunday of Easter, which is also known as Good Shepherd Sunday, for all of us, regardless of what our calling is in life, the state of life that the Lord has called us, each one of us to, today speaks very intimately about vocation. All of our vocations, not just the vocation to the priesthood, but the vocation to the married life, the vocation to the diaconate, the vocation to the single life. Wherever God has called us, it speaks very, very intimately and very distinctly to those of us who are seeking to fulfill our vocation in life. And so, in doing this, we are all called to be shepherds in one way or another, whether it be a spiritual shepherd, as in the priesthood or the diaconate, or even those of us who volunteer to do various things, the RCIA team, the various religious ed that we have, that in all these things, we're called to be spiritual shepherds in leading others to Christ. And so even in our homes, where we work, our schools, everything, we are called to vocation. We are called to be shepherds. We are called to be those who lead others to Christ. And so in this time, let us take a moment to think about our vocation in life, the vocation to which God has called each one of us to. I know I can only speak to my own vocation because I know me better than I know anybody else, but not as good as God knows me. And so when I look back in my vocation, I was one who for many years in life, as I've shared before, I wanted to live my own way. Yes, I loved God. Yes, I wanted to serve the church, but I wanted to do it on my terms. I wanted to do it when it was convenient for me, and I can volunteer to the things that I wanted to do and not do the things I didn't want to do. And so that's the way I lived my spiritual life. I went to church every Sunday. Most people thought I was a pretty good Catholic. They'd see and hear me say and do other things that maybe threw a wrench in that thought. But nonetheless, people from the outside would see my life and say, you're living a pretty good Catholic life. But I knew that there was something still missing in there, that following very intimately that call to Jesus, that call in which he has led me to and led each one of us to follow him in a very distinct way in which we live our vocation to its fullest. And finally, at age 40, I joined the seminary. Because in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I want to do things on my own term. I want to be a good Catholic. I want to go to Mass every Sunday. I want to volunteer with the youth. I always liked that. But I don't want to do this because, no, I don't like that. And so Jesus said, follow me, which means giving your all. And so finally, one of the greatest decisions I ever made was to finally say, yes, I give in. I give over to you everything I have, everything I am. And so with that, not only did I enter the seminary and give of my life, but for me personally, at age 40, I had a career. I had owned a home for about 10 years. I had what many people would think is a very good life looking in from the outside. But I always knew there was something missing. You see, because as I've shared before, I always wanted to be a dad. I always wanted to get married and have kids. And that's a very good thing. That's a very holy thing. And that's the hard part for us as we discern. Because it'd be very easy if my choices were to become something that was totally abhorrent or to become something that's very good, like a father, a husband, or a priest, a deacon, whatever that vocation may be. There's a dichotomy, a very clear distinction between these two choices. But when the choices that and I think many people go through this same decision, when they look at their vocation in life, and maybe they feel that little bit of a tug on their heart to either be led into marriage or led into priesthood, whatever it is, to follow God's call, that trying to decide between those two things are sometimes much more difficult because they're two very good things. The priesthood is very good. Being a father and a dad, a husband, is very good. And so trying to decide between those two is what the process of discernment is all about. And so finally, at age 40, like I said, I cast everything aside. I left the security of having a job that I had had for 10 years that I was good at. I left the home that I owned for 10 years. I had to sell the home. And many of you who are homeowners probably remember we had the housing crash back in the mid-2000s there. And I was trying to sell my house in the middle of the housing crash. Yeah, wasn't always the easiest thing. Luckily, I shouldn't say luckily, by God's providence, that somebody had made an offer on my place that I could walk away with paying off what was owed. So after 10 years, I didn't make any money, but I didn't owe anybody anything. I could walk away from it. And as I told the Daily Mass crowd earlier this week, that after 10 years of living somewhere, you guys probably all know that you accumulate stuff. I had plenty of stuff everywhere. I had a whole house full of stuff. I needed to get rid of all this stuff because, as the bishop told me, Bishop Brahm at the time told me, he says, look, when you join the seminary, that's your full-time job. So unless you have a way to pay your bills, you will either have to get rid of all your debt or you might have to wait until that day comes. And so I had to wait. So for the next 3.5 years, I went, because I had personal debt. I owned a car. I had to try to sell my house. I had credit card debt, a little bit of student debt at the time. And so I had to pay off get rid of all those things. So for the next 3.5 years, I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, sometimes I worked 4 jobs. I would pick up jobs here and there, where and when I could, to try, and all that money went to pay off everything that I owed. And then finally, it all happened all in about a week's time. The house sold. I was able to pay off all my debts. I was able to pay off everything. But this was after over 3 years of giving in to this. See, because for all of us, whether it be marriage, whether it be priesthood, whether it be the diaconate, that living our vocation often involves some very difficult choices. And sometimes those choices are we have to examine the relationships that we live in. Sometimes those choices involve we have to examine what it is that we're spending our money on and where are we truly living? What are we giving our time to? Because that's very telling of that which we treasure. Where do we give our time? And so for me, at this time, at the end of 3.5 years, I finally walked into the bishop's office with a copy of my credit report. And I said, see, right here it says total outstanding debt, 0. I paid off everything. And he said, well, congratulations. I'd like to extend you the opportunity to apply as a seminarian for the Diocese of San Diego. But just because I became a seminarian doesn't necessarily mean I'd become a priest. And so here, at this point, I had walked away from a job I was at for 10 years. I had left all my possessions. And I will say this, too, that after I sold the house and I had to get rid of all my stuff that I accumulated over 10 years, I put a couple ads out of saying that I got to get rid of everything. I got one response, just one. And so it came down to that crunch time where I was going to join the seminary in a couple of weeks, and I still had a house full of stuff. And luckily, there was 2 guys that I worked with at the time that was just at the job I was about to leave, and they had just both graduated college, and they were moving out of their parents' house for the first time, and were getting an apartment as roommates. And so I asked them, I said, do you guys have stuff you need for the house? I said, do you have kitchen stuff? Do you have stuff for the bedroom, the living room, everything else? Yeah, no, not really. They had a couple of little things. It's kind of like I remember these days when I first moved out of the house, my lounge chair in the living room was the lawn chair that I owned. And so I remember those days. And so over time, I was able to get stuff. But here I was with a house full of stuff. And so I asked them, I told them, I said, you have a truck, right? One of the guys, he said, yes. I said, come over to my house on Saturday. I said, and anything you guys take, you guys can have. You don't have to pay for it, nothing. I gave away a house full of stuff that day, because believe me, they took everything. They took beds, they took the sofa, they took all the living room furniture, all the kitchen gadgets, all the stuff. Even a surround sound system that I had, they took. And so they took everything. But I tell you that after many years of paying for these things, I had become a slave to my payments. I'd become a slave to this. So I worked solely so I could pay the bills that I had accumulated. And so giving away this stuff that was 10 years of, most of our kids are over there. You guys probably can identify with this. As I looked around, 10 years of the crap that I had everywhere, that it was a very freeing feeling to be free of all that stuff. I had often thought that once this is gone, that I would feel empty. And no, it was very freeing for me to be able to walk away from that and to be able to be at a point where I could walk away from the payments that enslaved me for having all this stuff. And I understand that as family, that we have to provide for our children, we have to provide for our spouses and things like that. I'm not denying that at all. I understand. That's all part of being a family. But for me, in my case, that's not what I was being called to. And so that was part of the process of making those hard decisions, was walking away from all that. And but walking away from that, which was very difficult because I no longer had a nice big TV to watch with a nice surround sound. But being able to walk away from that also allowed me to no longer be a slave to my payments anymore, to no longer to be a slave to my credit card bills. And so over the 3.5 years, other than my house payment and the insurance I had to pay, everything I made went to paying off those debts. And like I said, I walked into the bishop's office with a copy of my credit report, and I said, it says total outstanding debt 0. But at that time too, like I said, that just joining the seminary is a process of discernment, of deeper discernment. The way that the bishop described it to me was, it's kind of, think of this whole process of dating somebody that you like. In the single life, you see somebody that you have that may look interesting to you. It's kind of like you looking at the life of the priesthood. It looks interesting to you. And then you join the seminary, which means you've begun the process of dating. And just because you date somebody doesn't mean you're going to marry him necessarily. And so it's the process of them coming to know you deeper and you coming to know them deeper. And so in that process of the seminary was always, there was still the unknown for me. Where is this going to lead? Because the one thing that we do, it's not an official vow of obedience, but we do take obedience to the bishop and to the seminary staff. So at any time they could have come to me and said, we've discerned that maybe the priesthood isn't for you, and this will be your last semester. And so then I'd have to go out and find another job, find another place to live, whatever else. So that unsurety, that walk of faith that I had to take, that God, regardless of what the outcome is going to be of this, will take care of me, that the good shepherd will look after me as he is training me to be a shepherd of people. And so in this process of all of this, that being able to learning to give of myself as the good shepherd gave of himself, give over to not only him, but also to his people. And I think that parents probably understand this better than anybody, because as a parent, you have to give yourselves not only to each other, but also you give your life for the family. You give your life for the good of the family. I've never met a parent who said they wouldn't lay down their lives for their children. So parents know what this call to vocation is exactly. And I've always said that it's probably parents that understand the mind and the heart of God better than anybody. Why? Because you know what it's like to sacrifice. You know what it's like to give, even when it's very difficult. You know that life, and you do it, and you do it willingly. Why? Because you know it serves the family. And so therefore, that's why the Good Shepherd lays down his life for us, because he knows it serves us to call us to our fruition, which is life with him, back to him. So when that day comes, when we are called home to heaven, it's not just that. It's today, here, now. We follow the Good Shepherd, and we lay down our lives as the Good Shepherd had laid down his life, so that each one of us can live free, live without the reins of those things that enslave us all the times. For me, it was my payments, among other things. But for some of us, it may be, like I said, examining some of the relationships that we're in. For some of us, it may be examining our attitudes, our ways of thought, or maybe the way in which we treat others. Maybe a tough examination of that, because the life that God leads us to involves tough decisions. It's not an easy road. It's not that sometimes we have heard that if you give your life over to God, everything's going to be fine and dandy just after that. No, not everything's going to be fine and dandy. There will be tough decisions in our lives. And we see the model of Jesus trudging his cross up the hill to Calvary. But he knew that had to be done so that all of us could be reunited with him. And we, just like our Good Shepherd, we trudge our crosses up the hill to Calvary so that we can resurrect from them and live in the freedom that the Lord has called us to. And so on this Good Shepherd Sunday, let each one of us look to our Good Shepherd as the model, as we are called to be shepherds in our own right, shepherds of families, shepherds of workplaces, shepherds in our parish, shepherds in our schools, in all these things, that we look to the Good Shepherd. And what does the Good Shepherd do? As we hear in the gospel today, he lays down his life for his sheep. And he is also, by doing that, it's a very real thing that the shepherd does, is they lay down literally in front so that any evil, the wolf, that might come and try to get their sheep, they have to get past him in order to reach the sheep. And so not only is he the good shepherd, he is the gatekeeper for all of us. Those things, that gate that keeps that evil away from us. And so we know that in all of this, that as we are called to be shepherds, we look to the Good Shepherd. We look to the Good Shepherd for inspiration. We look to the Good Shepherd for the ability and the power to do what we do, what all of us do, because we are all called to vocation. And let me just say this, vocation is doing God's work. So one vocation, we like to say one might be better than the other, so long as what is best is doing God's work. That's what is best. Doing the becoming the person God has called us to be, that is what is best. Whether that leads to the priesthood, whether that leads to the married life, whether that leads to the single life, or somewhere in between, that following that which God has called us to, that is what is best. Not something different. Not something like I tried to do, was walk with my feet in sort of two circles, where I wanted to be a good Catholic, but I also wanted to do things my way. And so, if I can quote a very wise man, Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid, he told Daniel-san, if you walk on the left side, you're safe. If you walk on the right side, you're safe. But if you try to walk in the middle, squish, he would say, you get squished. And so I was getting squished by trying to live these two lives and live them simultaneously. And so on this Good Shepherd Sunday, as I said before, let us examine our lives and our call to be shepherds and our call to vocation in life. And let us live our vocation to the fullest so that we can be signs of God's love to everybody we meet. Amen.